Warning. This podcast contains spoilers for She-Hulk Episode 4. This week in the Hive Mind, where we bring on experts, usually me and Jason with some guests, to discuss their work and more. And I am so stoked to say that I am joined by none other. You already know him, but he's Emmy nominated, writer behind Futurama, writer behind Robot Chicken, and of course, most relevant right now, writer behind She-Hulk. It's Cody Ziglar!
Thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure knowing that we're going to yell about things that are both dear to our heart, which is comic books. So it's a perfect way to spend a afternoon.
I feel like we're going to do a lot of yelling this episode.
I feel like it always happens.
It definitely, me and you are big yellers and talkers anyway. So I feel like when you put us in a room, it's like we can get very excited. Okay, so before I want to talk about episode 4, obviously, because it's amazing. It's going to be out when the episode's out. Because every episode of this show is my favorite episode as we go in, but 4 is currently there. But first, because I feel like we never really got to talk about this when you were on the show more regularly as one of our amazing co-hosts, like, how did you get involved in She-Hulk? What was that arc like for you?
It's a very funny and like weird story. So like the shortest answer is that like I was producing podcast for the show called Yo, Is This Racist? And one of the co-hosts, Tawny Newsome, she had booked the show Space Force, so she had to go shoot in the desert basically for like 4 months. And she was like, "Hey, do you want to like be a guest host on this? Because it'll just make your job easier since you're already producing and cutting it." It's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And I did it. And the other co-host, Andrew T, was like, "Hey, I can't tell you what it's for, but someone heard you on the show and they thought you were funny, and they wanted to know if you had a sample." I was like, "Great, sure, let's do it." So I gave my sample. But before that, maybe a week before that, I had met Jessica Gao, the showrunner, at like a dinner. We hit off, we followed each other on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And then like maybe a month later, my manager called me. He was like, "Hey, Marvel wants to meet with you." I was like, "Me? Why? Did they get the right Cody Ziglar?" Like, "Yeah, dude, I guess you're going to have to figure it out." And I walked in and I saw Jessica there. And she's like, "Oh, hey, what's up, dude? I thought you were funny. I heard you on the show and I wanted to know if you had a sample. Welcome to the big leagues." And like, that's how I got the job. Was basically we met eating way too much food. And then she thought I was funny and she asked me to be in the room. And like my role besides, Zeb Wells was very much the MCU comic book nerds in the room. So like whenever they needed like a villains for the week, like, oh, Wrecking Crew or like this character, like we were very much those guys. And then they're like, "All right, great. Now calm down and let the adults go back to like doing the real work."
Then in that case, I have to thank you because like the Wrecking Crew are like god tier in our house. So that was like, I was like screaming. And I have lots of like theories about that going forward. But I love that got to be your role because that's how we both ended up on this show. We just love this stuff and we talk about it a lot. So it's that's kind of the dream. And Jessica's so great. Like I got to interview her for the junket, her and Kat, and they were both just, when you speak to them, you just immediately understand how the show is so good.
Like Jessica is so funny. Like she's so funny, and like she for my money, I mean obviously I'm biased because I wrote for the show too, but like I think she wrote my favorite episode of Rick and Morty, which is Pickle Rick, and like you watch that and you're like, "Oh yeah, she knows what she's doing."
When I found that out, I was like, wow. I was like, I have talked to a legend because my nephew, obviously probably one of the most iconic episodes of Rick and Morty, which means it's one of the most iconic episodes of adult animation.
Yes.
But my nephew loves Pickle Rick. My nephew has Pickle Rick toys. My nephew sings the Pickle Rick song.
That's so funny.
It's so like when I found that out, I was like, I'm gonna get cool points. I was like, aside from the fact that the show is just great. So we're gonna be 4 episodes in when this airs, but 3 episodes in, how does it feel to like see, we follow each other on social, we see all the fun memes, we send them to each other and stuff, but like how's it been for you to see people just embrace the vibe of the show and the comedy and the tone and just something that's totally different than what we've seen in the MCU before?
Dude, it's so fucking surreal. Like, cause like this, like we wrote this in like 2019 was like November 2019 was like the first day that we started. So like we wrote this stuff, and this is before. Like, really, I think Gal said this Jessica, I call her Gal. Gal says this all the time. She's like, Vision walked so we could run. It's like no one expected like this level of shit post. Like that didn't exist back then. Like you just wrote a show that you thought were funny, and like you didn't think that anyone was going to latch on to like Vision wearing like a black turtleneck and making him like a black fraternity. Yeah, like no one would have pictured that. So like we didn't picture that like people were going to latch on to like step on me, mommy. Like, and we know that was going to be the energy for social media posts for the show. So it's been really cool seeing like people like really dig it, and also just like seeing like the real like She-Hulk. Like you're on set and you see Tatiana in like the gray makeup and stuff on like platforms. You're like, I don't know how this is going to like be a real thing. Like, how does this work? Like, I've seen it happen, but like, at the moment you're looking at like PlayStation 3 graphics and you're like, oh man, how does this become a real person? And then like, so you like the VFX team puts in tons and tons and tons and tons of work and makes it a real thing. And like, now that people are actually out and enjoying it, it's been really cool. I'm super stoked. Like, it's been a very, very surreal year.
Yeah, you're definitely right about how the shit post conversation set you guys up so perfectly to be in conversation with fans in a way that like none of us could have even seen. Like, the memification of the MCU is incredible. And so, like, again, it's funny because I'm just like, how does it feel to be part of the MCU? You mentioned, like, you are a fan of this stuff. So what's that side of it been like, being in the room and shaping, like, she's like an iconic character. Like, we forget a lot of the MCU began with, like, what were essentially B, C, D level characters because of licensing. She-Hulk was up there above pretty much most of the characters that we started the MCU with. So how does it feel to be part of the MCU but also be bringing this, like, such an iconic character to life?
Dude, I mean, this was the end game. Like, the end game was getting the MCU job. Like, that would be like really my first big staffing job. Was kind of crazy. Again, I cannot praise Gal enough for putting me on and giving me like my first shot. Like, the room was fantastic. Majority women, majority black women, which is like just rare in Hollywood. And like really letting me fly my freak flag as high as I possibly could. She's already told the story, so like it's not a spoiler now. But like, there was one day we were talking about Daredevil in the room, like, hey, like, how does his power work? Blah blah blah. Like, what's his vibe? And I just happened to have Mark Waid's comic in my backpack, and I pulled out, the scene where like he's walking with Foggy. It's like the double spread, and like you see his powers and stuff. Like, this is how it works, and like they all like stopped and like, you have to calm down. Like, you cannot be the guy that pulls out a literal comic book in the middle of a conversation. Like, we appreciate the enthusiasm, but you need to relax. So like, that was very much me every day, being like, I'm going, like, I made it. Like, I'm going to Disneyland every single day and hanging out with some of the funniest, most talented writers that are in the game right now.
That would definitely be me. Like, I would have to be having my ultimate filter on, because every single second I'd be like, oh, like issue 236, like, that character, let's make sure we put in a John Buscema Easter egg, like Sal Buscema Easter egg. Like,
and like, you're reading the room and stuff, and like, I really like a good friend that I really made in the room was Zeb Wells, who's writing Amazing Spider-Man now. But like, he would be sitting next to me, and like during lunch breaks I'd be seeing him on his computer typing away. I'm like, what is that? And like, I'd see like a giant spread of like Ant-Man fighting like 3 giant bugs. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm writing comic books. Like, this is the art that I get in for my next issue. And then like, oh, right, you can do that? Like, this is how it works? He's like, yeah, man, do you want to like write comic books? I was like, duh. So like, like, honestly, like, that room also is what got me into like writing comics. Like, that's how
so cool.
Zeb saw me pull out a comic book. He's like, all right, he's one of my own. And like, he's how he put me in contact with the Spider-Man offices. So like, it really, everything that I've been doing right now, I've got because Gal took a shot on me and put me in the place to make all these connections and make some really good friends.
That is so rad. And kind of I guess we'll jump into making new friends, because I feel like the MCU's new BFFs are introduced in episode 4. But before we get to them, because they are the best part, Wongers and Madison, you will all be knowing Madison's name very soon if you haven't already.
Yeah.
But the episode starts with a very funny Easter egg that answered a very funny kind of joke that answered a lot of questions. You know how this stuff is. This is like basically most of my job is just working out what's this, what's that, what does this relate to, where did this come from. So there had been a lot of people have been very excited because they'd seen something that they thought said Johnny Blaze in the trailers leading into She-Hulk. I had noticed that it didn't have enough letters to be Johnny, so I tried to temper people's expectations. But it is actually something that may be better than Johnny Blaze, which is Donny Blaze, the shoddy magician, who somehow got his hands on a sling ring. So could you talk a little bit about that and how fun it is? Because it just sets up this episode so brilliantly and just adds that comedy that we know is really going to be at the forefront.
So this was actually this was written by Melissa Hunter, one of the fantastic writer, actress in her own right. And this was actually, I think this might have been like the second script written in the room was like Melissa. So like, you know, one of the big things that Gal was sort of like was really into is like, you know, where She-Hulk should be LA based because one, we live in LA, and also like MCU, everything takes place in New York. You know, like it's a joke to go like the West Coast Avengers. Like you very rarely get to hang out in LA. So like, yeah, let's have fun with this. And like, you know, we really want to hit all the like some of the like LA specifics, like Magic Castle. Like that's a thing that's really known out here. Like it's a very specific type of person that would be into that. And it's also a very specific type of person that like can't even make it to the Magic Castle, like the junior leagues of Magic Castle. So like that'd be fun. And like, you know, the whole conceit of the show is that like it's a episode, or it's a trial of the week, or a thing of the week. So like, yeah, it's through and through a sitcom from up top to bottom. And like, I can't remember how we got into it, but we're like, yeah, it'd be fun if like there's got to be dropouts, right, that went to like the Mystic School of the Arts that like couldn't cut it, or like they flunked out. Like, you know, we can't imagine that Doctor Strange was like the only guy to like sort of like cause a commotion there. So like, yeah, what if we got a guy that made it like 2 semesters into magic school and got kicked out, and this is like his grift now, is like working these things, and like that's sort of like the conceit for the show, and that's where it all came from. So like, once you get that in order, like once you get the comedy engine in, you can just add in any funny thing you want to. And like, Melissa would do this really funny pitch in the room where she would like, Wonger should have like a like this like party girl that meets her, and like he should be like named Madison, and like she would always do this joke that made it into the episode. She's like, my name's Madison with an I and out of a Y, but not the one you think. Like she used to do that, and like we would laugh so hard in the room, and like she was like, yeah, we got to put that in, and like she made it in there. So like all the funny stuff in the room is like, it's just like basically taking all of our toys in like a little sandbox and smashing them together for like the best comedic effect.
Yeah, so speaking of Madison, who I do love, and everyone will be saying it soon, yeah, Madison with 2 N's and a Y, but not what you think it is. And she is the unlucky guest of, you know, Donnie Blaze, who opens a sling ring, makes Madison disappear. And you think that might be the last that you see of Madison, but lo and behold, Madison ends up on Wong's couch, where Wong is trying to watch The Sopranos in a very relatable.
Yes, we've all been there.
3 years. We've and Madison is a perennial spoiler, which I love. She just can't help it. She's excited. So could you talk a little bit about how fun it was to be in the room when kind of working out that dynamic between Wongers and Madison? Wong is kind of reluctant, but also like very fucking funny. Like Benedict is so great. This kind of reluctant, cranky guy, but who like he never tells Madison to leave. Like he wants his best friend.
Yeah. But you get the sense that he likes to have like a new friend around, and like that was very much some of the fun. The fun of the game was like pitting out this guy that, you know, when Strange first came into Comatage or whatever, he was like the new fresh guy, and like Wong was like the stick in the mud. So like it'd be fun to like have that sort of those roles reversed. And also, like, it's just like a classic comedic pairing. You put like this like sort of stick in the mud that also doesn't mind letting his hair down, like, you know, the big fun runner that sort of just popped up out of nowhere through these movies. Is like Wong does not like, he's not sticking around for like the big fight. He's like, I'll let these, he's not like, I'm out, peace, y'all handle this. So like, it'd be very funny if like someone plopped in where he couldn't get away from her, like she's always following him, and like you end up becoming begrudgingly best friends. And like that was just a fun comedic conceit that, like, you know, you get a bunch of wackos in a room, like, yeah, we got to beat this in the ground as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and you talked about like the kind of legal comedy aspect, which I feel like really comes like episode 1 and 2, you're establishing it, but 3 and 4, you really get to have that fun like Boston legal-esque, wacky trial of the week. And this is, I feel like, really good comic book stuff, because a lot of the stuff that She-Hulk actually serves in the comics or represents in the comics is like very boring. It's like trademark law. It's cease and desists. So this is perfect because Wong calls up Jen and he's like, look, I need to cease and desist Donnie Blaze from using a sling ring, calling himself like a master of the magic arts. And that's the kind of the trial we get into. So could you talk a little bit about bringing that, because that's the most unique thing about She-Hulk, is it's very slice of life and ground level, even though it's superhuman law. Yeah,
I mean, like, first you gotta give a shout out to the comics. Like, the Dan Slott run is like where a lot of that stuff came from, and like Gal, that was really like her vision for the show. And like, it definitely didn't hurt to have like an actual lawyer in the room. Like Barbara Curry, one of the supervising producers, like, she did practice law before she became a TV writer. So like, whenever we would get to those scenes, we're like, all right, what do like adults do when this stuff happens? And she like give the like real pertinent information, like, all right, now we can like make it funny. But like, yeah, you know, that's the perfect, like, that's usually like the perfect formula of like a sitcom. Like, you know, Cheers has the bar, like Seinfeld has like the cafe, even I guess Friends has like their like cafe they hang out with. So like, the like sort of like story anchor engine for this is like the courtrooms. Like that's what you come for. Like you get a little bit like the legal stuff, you get your jokes in, but then like you get to go and like follow the fun, as opposed to like actual procedural where you would be in the room for like 4 or 5 acts for like really heavy stuff, and you're like, this isn't fun anymore. Like we don't have to have the 3 jokes per page. Like we're talking about defamation and all this stuff.
Yeah, and what was it kind of, you talked a little bit about Sandbox, and I just feel like you're talking about kind of the breaking down of the show, breaking down an episode. What's it like to be able to just be like, oh, let's introduce the Wrecking Crew. Oh, wait a minute, we're continuing this law of Wong always kind of getting away, and this is us introducing someone he can't get away from. How fun is it to be able to kind of like delve into what is probably the most popular sandbox in the kind of cinematic world right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I was speaking as a staff writer who was a super into like the MCU. For me, it was a dream. Like it was cool. Like we had like 2 different whiteboards. One like the big board that had like the story stuff, and one like a flip one that would just have like characters or bits that we would just like pitch. Like, hey, what if this character showed up? Like, what if we did this? Like, just like basically like a list of like blue sky ideas that we have for like episodes or like dumb cases of the week or whatever. And like we also had 2 of the execs were in the room, Marvel execs. So like whenever we'd be like, hey, is this character available? We would just say them, and then like it was like the mentats and like doing like their eyes would roll the back of their head, and then it come back down like, actually this character's being used in this, so you can't use it, or like this character's still being owned by like Sony, so we can't use them, like all that stuff. So like it was cool just being like they're able to throw out like ideas and like, or like characters, and like they'd be like yes, no, yes, like it was like I felt like I was like doing like comic book nerd trivia, like what obscure character can I find that hasn't been scooped up by somewhere else that we could use. And like it was just so fun, like just being able to like yelling out like different comic book characters, like a group of like 9 other adults that are getting paid to do this for a living. Like you couldn't have asked for a better job. Yeah,
the dream. And when it comes to like, obviously you get there, you break it down, you see Melissa's great pictures. What was it like to then see Patty Guggenheim, who plays Madison, come and bring that character to life in just like the most perfect way?
Dude, so like yes, like we read the script in the room, and then like we left, and then like the show shoots. So like literally the first time I saw it was like basically in the theater. Like that was like I had seen some like roughs and dailies and stuff that but like I didn't get to see like the actual performance. But like you're watching it and you're like, oh fuck, Patty is so good. I mean, if you don't know, like she's a fantastic comedic performer, and she does a bunch of groundling stuff out here, but also she was in the show Florida Girls, which I think ran for like 2 or 3 seasons, but like she was fantastic on that. So like she was great. Like I remember I ran into her at like the after party, and we were just like, oh my god, like you not only did you like kill it, but like you elevated the material so much. Like you made it Madison. Like I cannot picture anyone else being Madison besides maybe Melissa, because she did in the room, but like just she was so good, and she was so fun. And like it's one of those things where like you want to just like, now I just want to like watch the whole series of like Wongers and Madison. Like I just want to watch that for like 6 issues or 6 episodes or whatever. Like see what they get into.
No, completely. And also like what I love about it is it's like, Patty, I hope you're prepared, because like that has a kind of Jimmy Woo style. Like you feel like this is going to be a character who's going to be coming back. Actually, when I spoke to Jessica at the press junket, she'd said like her dream was to do like a Wongers and Madison like Halloween special, which I'm just like,
that would be so fun.
How good would that be? What would like, if just playing, because obviously this is absolutely playing. No, Zig is not revealing anything. But like in your dream of the sandbox and everything, what would you like to do with Madison? Like if you could do anything and throw out any wild character.
You know what? I want to see Madison on vacation with Wong. Like I want to see them on like a cruise ship, and like there's there's a cruise ship. Maybe there's like a Dazzler is like the onboard like musical guest or whatever. And like there's no real high stakes. It's just them on a cruise, like being like a begrudging couple for like 30 minutes or however long the actual thing is. So like I want to see them, like I want to see like they run out of like shrimp cocktails. So like Wong does his gang signs and like pops more down from like the mirror dimension. Like I just want to see them existing in like a confined space on a ship for like an episode. Like that's all I want to see.
That sounds perfect. And also we know Wongers loves karaoke, so I could definitely see them doing some good performances.
Oh, you know what?
Dance classes.
The Hypno Hustler breaks in and like he starts to steal. So it becomes a 4-way fight between Wongers Dazzler versus Hypno Hustler.
That sounds absolutely brilliant. I'm like, Feige, let's greenlight it. I would love to watch. You could do so much fun with that as well with the cruise ship, because like you know, they do these like comic book cruise ships where like cartoonists and comic book creators go on it. You could have it where there's like, they just so happen to be on one where it's loads of like ex superheroes or like minor level superheroes. So you've got people doing little signings and everything. Oh, that could be so fun.
Oh, that'd
Wong's
be so
like,
fun.
This is the wrong cruise. He does not want to be on that cruise.
Wongers, have some fun.
Come on, Wongers, we got to go watch, you know, Endgame. Do you know what happens at the end? It's just such a delightfully fun episode.
Yeah.
And do you have like when you got to sit there in the theater and at the El Capitan at Disney's theater and watch them at the premiere, did you have like a favorite moment or something that kind of surprised you from any of the first episodes?
Yes. So like seeing the Meg the Stallion tag was so fucking cool because like, you know, I think we had like a different tag in the original like writer's room, and I think that's something that Gao added later. But like, remember she was telling me about like, yeah, we got Meg the Stallion. She's like, don't tell me anything else. I just cannot wait to see what it is. And like seeing it like actually happen, like seeing the crowd like lose their mind at that was so fun and so like cool. Like oh yeah, the jokes are like landing, and like it's one of those things where like like when we like left the screening, we're like, oh man, that's the one that's gonna like break Twitter for like a week. And like this course is gonna be impossible for like a full 7 days, and like you're just gonna see nothing but that GIF, time after time.
And it was true. And now now that we know that She-Hulk can twerk, and we've seen her do the Hulk clap, now we need to see those powers put together, and she would definitely be able to beat Thanos.
It's too much power. Like you got to separate it. Yeah.
And kind of like another thing that I just think is so wonderful about this show that you've kind of touched on with yours and Zeb's roles, but I think it comes in on every level. Like when I was speaking to Jessica and to Kat about like building in the comic book aspects is so important, but to do it from like Jen's perspective, which I love, kind of that we saw with the Wrecking Crew. How much kind of intention, I'm guessing by having Zeb and you there, it was a lot, but how intentionally did it feel when you were in that room, kind of that you were purposefully trying to make this feel like a comic book? Because it feels like single issues. It feels like that story of the week. It feels like, you get something bigger if you watch it, but you could watch any of them and have fun. Yeah,
I mean, it definitely, like, obviously we had a fantastic head writer showrunner, which was Jessica. Like I'm sure she told you her pedigree, but like she worked in a comic book shop since she was like 16. She's a huge comic fan, particularly just like not just superhero stuff, but like the indie stuff. Like she loves Love and Rocket. Like she's a huge fan. Also, like one of the other writers, Jackie Gell, she wrote, her and her sister wrote this third episode with Megan Thee Stallion. Like, she was also a huge comic book nerd. So, like, you have, like, you know, you have it coming down from the top with Jessica and then Zeb and then me and Jackie and, like, all the other people in the room. It was just, like, it was great. Like you said, like, you have whole days where, like, you're just talking about, like, oh, what characters would be fun to, like, see interact with, like, Jin. And, like, the idea is that, like, you know, Jessica, you know, she was, like, she has written so much television. Like she has written truly like she has fully put in her 10,000 hours 15 times over. So like she was like very much like their edict was like, we want it to feel like a TV show, like a classic sitcom where like there's like a little bit of a through line, but the idea is that like you could just pop up in any episode and like cool, this is what's happening this week. And like it's been really cool seeing that like transition to like the final end of it. But like like we would have full like weeks of blue sky where we just talk about like the fun comic book stuff that would make us like super happy and super nerdy. And then like after we would get done yelling about it, they're like, all right, we have to do actual work now. We can't keep talking
real
about
TV stuff. That makes so much sense though, that was Jessica's intention about the TV thing, because I've spoken to so many people, comic book people, not comic book people, like who are just like, this feels like it could be running on ABC for 9 seasons. Yeah. Like it feels like a classic TV sitcom. Did you go back and kind of like dig into anything like Boston Legal, Ally McBeal, like personally to kind of get the vibe of what you guys were going for? Yeah. So before we started, Gal sent out a like the Bible for like the show, and then like, hey, you should watch these series because this is really what like it's gonna be like. We're really grabbing a lot of stuff from this, but like, you know, Fleabag was obviously a big one for like the fourth wall breaking, because it was like such a fun way of like doing it, and like it played into like Fleabag's character for like for the arc. And like, I mean, I could yell about Fleabag forever, so I won't do that. But like Fleabag, no, but you can see the Fleabag influence on the show for sure. Even the way that something that I think is really cool that the show kind of learns from Fleabag is like the way that the fourth wall breaks can impact other things
Yes,
that are going
yes.
on, which isn't so much something you can explore as well in comics, but in TV. And I love that first introduction of Jen properly breaking the wall where she has no idea what's going on behind her, and at the end she just agrees to something, and she's like,
unprecedented
so that's really
for
cool.
sure.
She's like, I'll be anxious about that for months, like wondering what I just said.
What did I agree to? So Fleabag, Better Call Saul, because it, like, yes, it's a drama, but like, you know, those shows are so funny. Like I mean, they could very easily, if you cut them down to 22 minutes, they could just be straight up comedies if they wanted to. And coincidentally, the O.J. Simpson was it
Oh, the Ryan
Fox?
Murphy
Yes,
American crime story,
A through line of the show is like dealing with like this lady's persona inside the court and like how the media portrays her outside of the court system, and like that's, you know, obviously like that's something that's been seeded in She-Hulk. So like those are like the three big things that like were really influential. At least Gal told us to watch to get prepared for like the mindset that we were going to come in for the room.
That's really cool, and it's nice to kind of all be on the same page when you're looking for influences. Obviously, you can all bring in your own things that you love and your own style. It's the joy of a writer's room. So something else that I think is kind of must have been wild about this show is a lot of the MCU shows so far have been pretty contained, even though they've included massive characters, obviously, and we've seen huge Avengers, all different kinds of people. Then we've seen new introductions. She-Hulk seems like it would be this, like you said, sitcom-focused, interior, funny. But within the first episode, you're introducing Bruce Banner. You're bringing in like big, heavy, original Infinity Saga players. Then you're bringing in Wong. So it's like no joke. Also, Emil Blonsky. So you're really getting to delve into the Incredible Hulk, which often gets kind of forgotten in the history of the MCU. What was that like? Because it's a whole different level than just introducing a new character in kind of a spin-off show. Is, oh, by the way, you're also going to have to make Bruce, and you're going to tease things about Bruce Banner that could be game-changing for the whole MCU, you know?
Yeah, I remember reading the pilot, I can't remember if it was the pilot or the pitch doc that Gal had put together, but I remember seeing like, you know, this is what the Hulk is doing, and this is how Emil goes into it. And then like in the room when they were like breaking the episode, I'm like, oh shit, the Hulk's going to be in like our TV show? Like, this is crazy, right? I was like, the Hulk is going to be in a spaceship in our TV show. That's insane. I can't believe this is like an actual thing that's going to happen. So like, it was wild being like, oh yeah, because that's one of those moments when I'm like, oh yeah, I forget that this is like a Marvel TV show. Like, if you want to have the Hulk appear in a thing, you can just ask them and like, yeah, Ruffalo would love to do more Hulk stuff. So like, we would get it in like that, or like, you know, when you're like, yeah, you can use Matt Murdock. I was like, we get to use Matt. Wait, what? This is crazy. Like, really? This is a real thing?
That's
it was so crazy. Like, it was just, again, so surreal to be like, oh man, like, we're going to have the Hulk and She-Hulk talk to each other. And like, that's such a weird thing. Like, like in your nerd brain, you're like, oh wow, this is like a real thing. This is how it happens. Like, you just get a bunch of people in a room and they're excited about a thing, and they ask someone and they like, yeah, you can do that. And then like 3 years later, Mark Ruffalo was like drinking daiquiris on a beach with like his cousin Jen. Like, it's so weird. Like, you think it would be so much harder to connect those dots from like A to C, but it's like, yeah, if you ask it, it's available. Like, you can make it happen, which is like crazy.
Yeah, I guess in that way it kind of, and you all have experienced this now because now you're also like a comic writer on a brilliant Spider-Punk with Justin Mason. Like, it's so similar to how comics are made, because in comics, like, somebody will have had a really cool idea that maybe they didn't think, they just kind of offhandedly put into a comic book 20 years ago, and then someone else will pick it up 20 years later and be like, well, actually, what if it was this? So I love to hear that it's very similar to that kind of like picking up and expanding on what other great people have done before you. Yeah,
I mean, that's funny. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that is very much like how a lot of the characters came for Spider-Punk. Is that they're like, I mean, obviously I'm a huge Taskmaster fan in general, and like I loved the Misfits, but like they were like, you know, we had Captain Anarchy, and like he was only in like a couple of shorts, and I was like, yeah, this is a cool character, like, but I also want my team to be like all people of color. So like, yeah, let's just make him like native and change his last name from Morgenthau to Morningdew, right? Like you could do that, and you're like, yeah, great, do it. Like, yeah, that's the whole purpose. Like that's the whole idea. Like even with I can't say it, but like I think I'm writing now, like there's a character that I'm introducing, and my hope is that like further down the line, people that are from that culture can like take that character and like expand on it. Like I'm really just like putting like a little seed that hopefully someone else can take and make it bigger and better ideas that like I would never even possibly think of.
I love that so much. And that's the joy. It's the ultimate continuous collaboration. And I think that it can be easy to imagine that wouldn't be the case in like a huge multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar franchise. But I love that these shows especially are giving creators that space to pick up on those little moments, to have someone in the room who says, hey, what about the Wrecking Crew?
Yeah, like how crazy is it that like that Carol Danvers just shows up at the last episode of like Miss Marvel? Like how cool is that? You know? Like,
I literally died. And also like even that's a great example of something I really love about these shows that I think is what's so unprecedented about them, just in general in any space, not even just the superhero space. We've rarely seen TV shows and movies that are so interconnected and actually have such a huge impact. So Captain Marvel turning up, it was so good, and it was so comics. I had to explain to so many different people what happened. I was like, no, Miss Marvel is not shape-shifting. It's all about these things called the Negabands. Don't get me started on Rick Jones. Like, and it became this whole thing. But then also like Bisha and, you know, Sana and everyone getting to introduce mutation and getting to have that the theme play, like that is so exciting. And how has that aspect of this been, not just being able to play with the sandbox of the past and these characters you love and kind of get to be in this Disneyland like you said every day, but how does it feel to imagine the things that you're seeding and how in 5 years you could be sitting in a theater after you've been writing something else, won all your Emmys now, you're just chilling, and you see something that you established in this show? What's that kind of feel like? Dude,
it's so weird. So like when I was in, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design for my grad degree in film, and like I met this dude there who coincidentally was from North Carolina like me. His name was Andy Cervanta. Like we were the guys that were always watching, like we're going to see Guardians of the Galaxy, we're going to go see Ant-Man. Like we were just like huge like Marvel fans. Like I remember like we were roommates, and like he had like one of those like Iron Man hot toys in like his room. Like we were broke as fuck, but like he decided to save his money and buy one of those. Like those were like what we did. So like it was so cool going to see those. And then like, you know, fast forward like 10 years, like we're on set together. Like I was on set, and like Andy was like working on this show. Like he works on a bunch of like the Marvel shows because he's in Atlanta, and like it was so cool, like just sitting there, like we're sitting there like just like talking, and like we see like, you know, Gal was like talking to Tatiana about notes or whatever, and like, we're like, this is crazy, like this is surreal. Like
you did it.
We did it. Like we went from like being fans to like working on the thing, and like I remember like we each took a picture of like the first time the credits roll and like sent it to one another. It was so cool. But like it's so wild to be like, oh yeah, maybe a thing that I write will like be referenced, or like would it be cool if like you see She-Hulk pop up in like Avengers 7 or whatever the thing is.
Oh,
and, like,
you know it's gonna happen. Like I know you can't say anything because we don't want people to think you're confirming things, but let's be real, I've had so many people message me and be like, does this mean A-Force is happening? If She-Hulk is here, does this mean A-Force? I think that people are still so excited about the idea of different people getting to lead teams, and I don't know if it needs to be as binary as it has had to be in comics before, but like you said, like teams of people of color, teams that are predominantly led by women, like that's the stuff that people want to see. And in a really brilliant way, She-Hulk introduces that, not just because She-Hulk like was the original leader of A-Force, which was the first all-female Avengers team, though not by name of the title, but they are the Avengers in the comics, but also because the show's just mad inclusive, because that's just what we care about and what people like Jessica care about. It's really cool to hear you say, I mean, I haven't gotten to speak to Jessica a lot, but it's very cool to hear you say that she loves Love and Rockets, because that's like my jam. Dude. And so I have Love and Rockets tattoos. So it's like, I love that we're at a place now where our peers are people who grew up with this stuff, and they don't just love one type of comic. They don't, it's not do you love Marvel and DC? It's like you love both, but you also love Love and Rockets, or you love Image. What's your special topic? Is it the founding of Image Comics? Is it the history of Saga? Is it you know, Hellboy? I love that that's the space we're in now, where like this thing that people used to tell us oh, please stop talking about that, or like just like go talk to your friends who like it. Now everyone's coming to us and they're like, so what does this mean? Like, which comic should I read? It's kind of a joy.
Yeah, I mean, she put me into a bunch of great stuff. Like, she put me on 11 Rockets, Dorkin, or Dork. Like, like, she put me, like I said, like, she spent years working at a comic shop, and, like, that's back before, like, you know, you had, like, social media. So, like, you would have to go to, like, cons to meet other indie providers or whatever, or be like, oh, we don't have this, but, like, there's a shop 2 towns over there. That's where you go to find, like, the weird, cool indie stuff. Go there. Like, oh, cool, I'll do that. So, like, it was just dope. And also, like, you know, you'd be on your lunch break. So like the Marvel Studios office is like, you walk in and there's like all of Iron Man's first like 3 suits, which is like crazy as fuck. So like you walk around, they just have props and stuff, but like in the kitchen area, they just have like their wall of comics. So it was just like basically every trade paperback you could ever possibly want to read. And like, you know, sometimes like you'd be on your lunch break like, oh, you know what, I haven't read like Secret Wars, like I'm just gonna read that. Or like, man, you know what, I always wanted to see like what you know, Kamala's first run was like. I haven't read that in a while. So like you go back and read that. So like it really is just like being like, oh man, like these people that like made comic books that get paid absolutely garbage and still get paid garbage, but like it's cool being like, oh yeah, like this built this empire. Like these writers and artists and editors and editors and all people that made this stuff like built this empire just by like working together and making really cool pop art. Like that's the thing that just like, you know, you don't think about it, you know. It's just like so cool seeing that like that's where like art can lead to.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I remember the first time when I really started to realize that the 2 worlds like do cross-pollinate. They did this book, it was a revamped version of an old Marvel title, Strange Tales, which is obviously that's like a very premiere title, but they did a short anthology collection version of it where each story was like a weird story by an indie cartoonist. So you have Gilbert Hernandez drawing Scarlet Witch and they're on like a beach party, and I was just like, oh, I was like, these are not 2 separate things. Like everybody who makes these, the Hernandez bros make comics because they love these things. And sometimes Marvel will come to them and be like, hey, what you saying? And I mean, Gilbert did even a Wonder Woman comic. So it's so cool, like you said. And I love that even in this huge Hollywood space and in a studio, which is so much outside of what publishing is doing, it's really lovely to know that they have those books. And even if, like you said, you know, we have many dreams about how people would get compensated in an ideal world, but it's nice to know that they have them there. They're not trying to make that separation that we also worry about, you know. We always want people to remember like these are the stories that influence. When it came to She-Hulk, actually, because you mentioned the Dan Slott run, which we've talked about a lot on the show and I've written extensively about, were there any other comics that you revisited, She-Hulk or otherwise, that really like got you into the zone of the show? Yeah,
I reread Mark's Daredevil run because I've been wanting to read it for a while because I was a huge fan of the show, and I was like, man, you know, I haven't really read much Daredevil outside of like Frank Miller's run, and I was like, I like like a modern take. And like I remember buying like the trade paperback, like the first 3 issues or whatever, or 3 copies of that, and like reading that and being like, man, Daredevil fucking rocks. Like I forgot how fucking cool Daredevil is. And like, you know, the seminal Hawkeye run, like I reread Hawkeye because I haven't read it since it first came out, and like that book is so fucking good. Like
it's unbelievable.
So
like
good.
Fraction and Aha are an unstoppable team.
Yes.
And you just see the absolute aesthetic, artistic story, narrative influence that it had on the show and it had on those 2 characters is unbelievable. Yeah, and that Mark Waid run is so good, and the Paulo Manuel Rivera's art is like unreal. Did you, this is just me giving you I'm not quizzing you, I'm just giving you a recommendation. Did you ever read the Charles Soule Daredevil run?
No, I did not. I heard it was good though.
Yeah. You should read it because Charles, he did a brilliant She-Hulk run and a brilliant Daredevil run. In my opinion, the best of both, because he was a lawyer.
Yeah.
So he brings that to the vibes. The Charles Soule one, to me, I feel like spiritually that She-Hulk book is very in line with what you guys were doing. So definitely, and the art in there is like unreal as well. Like it's just, we're blessed. There's so many brilliant artists. I mean, you know, because you're getting art back with Spider-Man in it.
There's like Justin Mason is such a phenomenal artist, and it's crazy to me that Spider-Punk was his first Marvel book. Like I cannot wait till he's like drawing everything on the planet. Like he's such a cool dude, and like
his art is so fucking good. Like it blows my mind whenever, you know, I'm a big fan of that book, but getting to see those pages and those characters and the stuff you guys did is just, it's so exciting. We're in a new era.
Issue 5 comes out this month, and I think there's a particular like section of like art that he does that I think you're gonna fucking lose your mind. It's so cool.
I'm so excited about it. I mean, as a writer, the best thing in the world is like getting that art back, you know,
Yeah.
from the artist. So what was it, you know, we kind of touched on it, but how does that feeling translate? Like, how does it compare to kind of getting to see a rough cut of something you wrote come to life for the first time?
It's I mean, this is the word of the day is surreal. Like it's because like, you know, you make like little rinky dinky stuff like, oh yeah, I've made some short films, like I did this, but like you actually
I made
like
a zine.
Yeah, I made a zine, but like being like, oh, Justin sends in like these fantastic designs. You're like, the first time I saw like his Taskmaster,
it's so good.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, you know, I was thinking maybe we could make him look like the Fiend. He's like, say less, and then he came back with that. I was like, this is so cool. Or like his Kamala designs, like she has like the embiggen on like brass knuckles, like that was it's just so cool.
Badass.
Like it's just so cool, and like it's been so fun. Like I personally, for me, like I think they say the same thing too, but like it's the most fun we've ever had, like writing anything. Like like the team was so great. Danny the editor is great. Jason is great. Justin the colorist is fantastic.
Yeah.
Like the lettering is Travis, the letterer
The lettering
is
is just unbelievable. Like that, I remember I messaged you and I was like, who is the letterer? And you
Yes.
were like, it's Travis. And I was like, oh my God. Like
Yeah.
I haven't seen a book in a long time from a big two publisher where the lettering feels so much apart. It's that like,
Yeah.
it feels like you're a kid watching Batman 66, like the bam, pow. It just feels like part of the story. Yeah. It's such a joy. I'm excited that I know you can't talk about it, but I'm excited that you're still writing more comics. Because to me, I was like, Spider-Punk feels like that's going to be the ongoing, you know, that's
I would
the
love
classic,
nothing more, dude.
that fingers crossed, because we know how it is. The way the big two works now is they announce a lot of miniseries and people get super stoked for them and they love them. And occasionally we get lucky enough that those might become ongoings or get continued. So I'm crossing my fingers because Spider-Punk sells out in my shop.
Nothing more. I would love
You
nothing
guys
more.
are such a stellar team. So yeah, that's really exciting. It reminds me a lot of like when I used to also work in a comic book shop.
No.
Yeah, I know, shocking. Can you believe it? She doesn't know anything about them. Why was she there? But I was there just post like the Marvel Now relaunch that included Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan's first appearance, The Young Avengers by Jamie McKelvey and Kieran Gillen, one of my favorite comics of all time. Same with Miss Marvel. I feel like now with things like Spider-Punk, with Hellions, I feel like we're in another exciting space like that again. Where we're getting to see new iterations of classic characters, where we're getting to see things that feel like they're going to become formative and impactful going forward. Yeah,
that's the way I mean, I've yelled about this, put you both on the show and off the show, but that's how I felt with like Kelly Thompson's Black Widow. Like I read that, I'm like, oh, this is like what Hawkeye did for Hawkeye. This is what Kelly's Black Widow is going to do for Black Widow. Like this is such a fun, exciting, different book. It's like I cannot wait for this new era of like writers to get in and artists to get in to like make these like new generation of comic books.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you are that for the MCU now, which is amazing.
I somehow weaseled my way in. They didn't see it coming.
You did it. You did the dream, and you just talked about stuff you loved. You were funny as fuck, which you are. And Jessica was like, oh, this is going to be good for us. And it was, because the show is so great. Okay, I could talk to you about this all day. But before we go, thank you so much for coming, because this was a joy. And it will not be the last time that Zig is here to talk about She-Hulk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So with that said, what can you kind of tease that's going to be exciting about the rest of the season? You don't have to tease anything that you're going to get in trouble about. But is there like stuff that you're stoked for people to see? Like, is there like a what the fuck moment that you can't wait for?
There's there's a very fun, big what the fuck moment that I will say nothing else about, but I am very excited about it. I think people are going to love it. I think you in particular are going to love it. It's very fun. It's from the twisted mind of Jessica Gao. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
it's great. It's really fucking fun. It's really cool. And like even the second half of the season gets somehow even better and funnier. It's just I'm biased because the calls come from inside the house, but like there's some really fun shit towards the end of the season.
Well, I can't wait, and I'm so happy for you because you're just so great and the show is so great, and I love to be able to see people getting the show and all the funny, sexy She-Hulk memes that we get to send
so
each other.
Diabolic at this point. It's just like the weirder the post, we will send them directly to Gal. It's very fun.
So yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, and can't wait to see your episode, which is coming up in the second half of the season.